Abraham Lincoln was elected in November of 1860. The Southern states were not pleased with having a president who had anti slavery views. The South decided to secede from the Union, starting with South Carolina in 1860, while others followed in 1861. The Civil War began on April 12, 1861, with the attack on Fort Sumter in the Arbor at Charleston, South Carolina. The death of Colonel Elmer Ellsworth, a friend of President Lincoln, in late May 1861, galvanized public opinion. He was considered a martyr to the Union cause. The first major battle of the Civil War took place on July 21st, 1861, near Manassas, Virginia, at the Battle of Bull Run. In September of 1861, a balloonist named Thaddeus Lowe ascended above Arlington, Virginia, and was able to see Confederate troops 3 miles away. The name for the people who controlled the lookout balloons were aeronauts. The Battle of Ball's Bluff in October 1861 caused the U.S. Congress to form a special committee to monitor the conduct of the war. In 1862, the Civil War became an extremely violent and bloody conflict. The Battle of Shiloh and the Battle of Antietam had extreme amounts of casualties. The Battle of Shiloh on April 6th and 7th, 1862, was fought in Tennessee and produced massive casualties. On the Union side, 13,000 were killed or wounded. On the Confederate side, 10,000 killed or wounded. Accounts of the horrendous violence at Shiloh startled the nation. General George McClellan launched the Peninsula Campaign, an attempt to capture the Confederate capital of Richmond in March 1862. General Robert E. Lee took command of the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia in June 1862 and led it during the battle known as the 7 Days. From June 25th to July 1st, 2 armies fought in the vicinity of Richmond. Ultimately, McClellan's campaign faltered, and by midsummer, any hopes of capturing Richmond and ending the war had faded. The Battle of the Second Bull Run was fought on August 29th and 30th, 1862, in the same place as the first battle of the Civil War the previous summer. It was a bitter defeat for the Union. Robert E. Lee led his army across the Potomac and invaded Maryland in September 1862, and the 2 armies met in the epic Battle of Antietam on September 17th, 1862. The combined casualties of 23,000 killed and wounded made it known as America's bloodiest day. Lee was forced to withdraw back to Virginia, and the Union could claim victory. 2 days after fighting at Antietam, photographer Alexander Gardner visited the battlefield and took photographs of soldiers killed during the battle. His Antietam photographs shocked the public when displayed in New York City the following month. Antietam gave President Lincoln the military victory he desired before announcing the Emancipation Proclamation. Following Antietam, President Lincoln removed General McClellan from command of the Army of the Potomac, replacing him with General Ambrose Burnside. On December 13, 1862, Burnside led his men at the Battle of Fredericksburg in Virginia. The battle was a defeat for the Union, and the year ended on a bitter note in the North.
The purpose of the Civil War was not to end slavery, but to keep slavery from spreading to the West. This slavery migration would give the South more economic power than the North. Abraham Lincoln is noted saying that if he could preserve the Union with slavery, he would. However, the Union could not be preserved with slavery, so it had to end. This attempt to end such a lucrative industry made the South feel that Lincoln was invading on their right to hold people as property. So they seceded from the Union, and the Confederacy was born. As the Civil War began, free black men and runaway slaves from the South joined the Union side to fight for freedom. The merging of black and white soldiers came with some tension. Abraham Lincoln was afraid that once black soldiers entered the Union, states would secede. African Americans did not officially join the Union side until Abraham Lincoln announced the Emancipation Proclamation. This document freed black people in the South and gave them incentive to fight with Northerners to defeat the Southern Confederacy. There was a common stereotype among white men that black men could not fight. However, this proved not to be true as they became extremely important in the war effort. African Americans not only fought for the North, there were African Americans who were forced to fight for the South. However, according to History.net, many African Americans in the South were spies for the North. One of these famous spies was Harriet Tubman. During the war, Harriet Tubman worked as a nurse, a cook, and a spy. She soon dedicated most of her time as a spy for the war effort and led armed soldiers into war. She freed over 700 slaves in South Carolina during this expedition. She was the first woman to go into war during this time. When she died in 1913, she was given military honors and buried at Fort Hill. Despite fighting on the same team, African Americans still faced discrimination. Many African Americans were forced into non-combative roles due to this prejudice. Not only were they seen as unable to fight, they were also paid less than their white counterparts. The most important battle for African American soldiers was the Battle of the New Market Heights. This battle took place in Virginia on September 29, 1864, and 14 of the people who battled received the Medal of Honor. By the end of the war, 179,000 African Americans had fought on the Union side. The roles African Americans had during the war were extremely important. Without their dedication to freedom, Union victory may not have happened. The Civil War finally ended April 9th, 1865, with all African Americans gaining their freedom.